If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This has been another episode sponsored by Online Horse College. If you haven't had a look at the wide variety of equine-specific accredited courses, then go to onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there. Before I introduce you to our special guest today on Horse Chats, I want to tell you about Sophie Barrington from Archer Creative, who sponsored the show today. If you'd like your horse business to have an appealing, easy-to-navigate website, talk to Sophie Barrington at Archer Creative. If you would like to find her details, just go to horsechats.com, search for Sophie, search for Barrington, or search for Archer Creative, and you'll find her. And I'll bring you back to our guest today. Our guest probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. He's Dan Steers from Double Dan Horsemanship. So Double Dan Horsemanship, we'll hear the story about how that was formed. But we'll talk to Dan about how he's developed his skills as a farrier and developed his horsemanship skills as well. How are you today, Dan?
I am very well, thank you, yes.
Yeah, good. Now, Dan, the first thing I'm going to ask you is your favourite quote. What have you got for us?
Well, I use a few when it comes to teaching in clinics.
Yep.
One of them that I like using is saying that horsemanship is simple. It's just not easy, which unfortunately a lot of us sort of struggle with. Sometimes we overthink it, and that's where I want to make it sure that people are aware that it's simple. But then you don't want to downplay it either, and make people sort of feel like, well, if they're not getting it, then that's something wrong with them. So I sort of, try to clarify that it is a simple process. If you can understand how the horse thinks, it is very logical. Mm-hmm. If you understand them, but at the same time, where it's difficult in my mind is probably putting it into practice. The other one that I use also is where I say to people, you do as little as possible, but as much as you have to be effective, because that can often be a bit of a problem too when working with horses is that we sometimes don't quite put enough, pressure on at times to sort of get a result. And because we're not getting the result, but then also not taking the pressure off, so you get your horse a little bit frustrated. I tell people it's like we're always, my goal is obviously to get the horses to respond as quickly as possible with as little amount of pressure applied as possible, but at the same time, I need to remain effective. So that's probably the two, standout quotes that anyone would hear me use, fairly regularly, mm-hmm. As well as obviously we've got some others there that we use as well.
Yep. Dan, I know that you didn't start, as a toddler with horses, because a lot of the times you think if someone's got great horsemanship skills, it must have been hereditary, their parents or grandparents, and they were born in the saddle. But you actually started a bit later than that. Do you remember the first time that you were introduced to a horse, or what your first experience was?
Yeah, so it was a little bit different, say, for myself than it was for the other Dan. He was certainly almost born on a horse. I remember his mum sort of telling me, first day out of hospital, they chucked, little Dan James up on the horse just to get him sort of imprinted.
Yeah.
But for myself, I tell the story, when we get asked often in an interview that the first thing I learned to ride was really the bus to school. So I didn't have any horses. I was brought up in Perth, in the city.
Yep.
So we used to skateboard and I used to, ride bikes, obviously, and that was, and even surf and play a lot of team sport. And I was a little bit of a delinquent at the time with my mum being a single parent. She sort of, which is probably fortunate for me, has forgot a lot of it, but I still probably remember giving her a fair bit of trouble. And my dad took a different role in the police force, and he was at a police and citizens youth camp where he was managing that. And it was only a few hours south of Perth, so Mum thought it might be a good idea to send me down there to straighten me out. And a part of the camp, it was an adventure camp, and they had horse riding there, and they were just sort of, your trail riding type of horses. Most of them, from memory, were all just standard beds that would sort of form a line and go out for these walk trails where they'd take kids out. And I started spending a fair bit of time at my dad's, and I really enjoyed I hadn't had a lot to do with him. I think I was 14 at the time, previously to that, and I just sort of fell in love with the country. I saw horses there all the time, but I never was drawn to them as far as, let's go and have a look at these things. It was more just by chance. So one day I was there, and my dad asked me, whether I wanted to go out on a trail ride with some other kids, and I just sort of thought, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, and I hopped on and just really fell in love with it. I just could not believe that you could control such a large animal. I just still remember as clear as day how fascinated I was that we could steer these creatures, and from there I just rode as much as I could. By the time that was 14, and the time I was 15, I'd left school and I was working full-time in the horse industry, and I've been full-time ever since. So I definitely got bitten by the bug, and it's been a huge, huge passion of mine since.
I think too, I know that we use a lot of equine assisted therapy and for troubled kids, troubled teens, but it sounds like, you might have fitted into that category, and you've really taken off with it. So it's a good news story.
Yeah, it's definitely given me some focus and something, definitely to do. But I got a hold of it with two hands, and I gave up pretty much everything else to really just do horses full time.
Yeah. Now, as a farrier, how long was your apprenticeship?
So I did like a 3-year apprenticeship to start with.
Yep.
But then even then I sort of went back after working. When I finished my apprenticeship, I left and I didn't really go out working on my own. I actually went and took up a job at a cutting trainer facility over actually on the East Coast, because at that point I was in Western Australia. And I was working there, and then when I came back from that, I did start sort of doing a little bit to farrowing, but I got involved with another master farrier by the name of Brent Tyler, and then I probably worked with him for another year or two, part-time, just really honing my skills with Brent and trying to sort of work on both, not only my horsemanship part-time, but also then my farrier skills as well. So we got involved in competition and working on blacksmithing a fair bit at that time as well. So, it ended up being pretty full on, because we'd come home from shoeing horses, and then you would, maybe have a drink and have a feed, and then you would be, over and working on the forge for all hours of the night.
Yeah.
Trying to sort of perfect, your blacksmithing skills, and then you'd go to bed absolutely buggered, and then wake up in the morning and go and start shoeing horses again. And I was always sort of training horses at the same time. So, it was pretty flat out for a little while there.
Yep. Now, thinking about a farrier, like you would have started, you only would have had, 12 months experience with horses and just trail riding horses before then.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, because I've talked to just working in racing stables and having a few farriers around, and kids would come in there and they'd have no experience with horses. How essential is it, or how much do you develop your horse handling skills now as a farrier? How essential is it that people have experience with horses before they start as a farrier?
Yeah, it really depends. What it was is I had no ambition at the time for becoming a farrier. What it was I was leaving school right or wrong at 15, and I wanted to train horses. That's what I wanted to do.
Yep.
And my dad was saying, you need to get a trade. It's all well and good becoming a horse trainer, but you need something to fall back on. So I sort of found the loophole there, going, farrier is a trade, so which he didn't argue with me. And the farrier at the time that we had, he was not only a really good master farrier, but he was also a really good natural horsemanship instructor and trainer.
Okay.
And so I sort of had the best of both worlds. So even though that I was developing my farrier skills at the same time, we were also working with horses every day and doing handling with, everything from unhandled horses to, going horses to problem horses. And he was one of those sort of no-nonsense farriers either. So if a horse was playing up, he would sort of just take control and educate the horse, so then it would be better for the next time, which was, a lot of, obviously, clients appreciated as well, because they're getting a bit of free training on their horse. And so I've got to see that, not only, like I said, doing the farrier apprenticeship, but also as a horseman as well. So we've been able to develop our skills in both, and it certainly helps if you do have a background with horses and understanding them. But like you've already mentioned, and even with myself, it's not essential when learning the trade. I think if you're comfortable around the horses and, not afraid of them, and you work with somebody like I did, who's, obviously really good with his groundwork skills, then it was probably beneficial going in with a clean slate, because I had no preconceived ideas.
Yep.
And my really early imprinting of horses was some really good horsemen and horsemanship. I didn't see any bad horsemanship for a fair few years after I started riding, to be honest.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, good imprint. And good that you just happened to end up with a farrier who did the work that not just the customers appreciated. Obviously, the horses appreciated because they knew where they stood and they could learn from that, but makes his job easier then. If he goes in with a badly behaved horse and educates it a little bit, then it's going to be better and an easier horse to shoe next time.
That was definitely the theory behind it, and that's. And then he had a relatively good line of horses. You'd only because you can only do so many in a sort of 4 to 6 week process. By the time we sort of tuned up most of the horses, you're only doing that maybe once a week. For a new client or a young horse or something like that. So most days it was pretty smooth sailing.
Okay. Yep. Now, think about to get a job as a farrier, to start off an apprenticeship as a farrier, or if you were looking for an apprentice, or if someone wanted you to recommend an apprentice, what sort of core skills, character traits do they need to have?
Well, I think first and foremost is just the ability to work hard. It's not only an extremely physical job, but then it's obviously like a lot of trades, it's long hours and hard sort of hard days, and especially in the weather elements. We were shoeing horses like in WA. You get a pretty hot summer. Feet get pretty dry. They don't get much rain or really no rain over summer. So, your feet are really hard and then, you're shoeing in a bit of heat and the rest of it all trimming. So we tend to find, and I don't know if this is me just getting older and a little bit bloody probably cranky in our older age, but you sort of find that the kids these days don't really have that, don't have that hard sort of, work ethic.
Is it like stamina?
Yeah, just a horsemanship deal. Like I think, I'm sort of really grateful that we didn't really have phones and certainly didn't have much to do with the internet when we were going through that time. And so it left you the ability to solely focus on what you were doing, where nowadays it tends to be that, from what I've had with the kids that have come, and even not necessarily about farrier apprenticeships, but certainly coming and working with us with the horsemanship side of things, getting that focus and not having that distraction of a phone and what their friends are doing and what, that fear of missing out, they call it.
Yep.
Yeah, it really hinders them. And that's probably the hardest thing for them to get when they start sort of shoeing horses and stuff like that, is to be able to not only obviously do the work, the physical work, but then be able to apply themselves as well and not have that distraction.
What do you think's the best thing about being a farrier?
What I think's the best thing? Well, it's when it comes to like shoeing horses, like particularly myself, like I find it's a bit of an art skill. I take I still, shoe sometimes my own horse. I'm getting worse and worse at doing it. I've got a couple of different farriers that probably keep the team going. But when I can, I like shoeing my own horses and really doing a nice job. It's something you can be proud of. Sometimes when, I don't know if it's like this for yourself, but certainly a lot of people I know, it's like, when you've freshly cut lawn, you look back and it's just such a satisfying feeling to see what you've accomplished, and then it looks good. The shoeing can be the same because, it's not like building a house or something like that where it's such a long process. It happens quite quickly, like mowing the lawn. And when the feet are long and, they're out of shape and maybe even cracks and things like that, then you go back and within half an hour, you've got a really neat looking foot with a new shoe on it. And, sometimes, we get a bit fancy and bevel edges and things like that, so it's really shiny. Put a bit of hoof oil on there, and it's something you can be really proud of what you've accomplished and how well it looks. And like I said, it's a bit of an art form to get everything right, angles right, the fit right. You can be really proud of your job, and that's something that I certainly enjoyed about it, as well as even just the fitness side of things, because you need to be pretty fit and strong, and it's natural. And for me and myself, like, I'm wasn't big at going to the gym or doing anything like that. But working with horses sort of just keeps you fit, and that's the bit that I probably miss about shoeing. Is now when I go to do a shoeing, I used to do a dozen a day, dozen shoeings plus a bunch of trims. And then nowadays, I'm buggered if I do one horse.
Yeah. All right. Now, talking, because you've sort of got this double career as a farrier, which is what you started, but as a horse person too, like even then you said when you started your apprenticeship you wanted to train horses. What attracted you to the whole idea? It was romantic, I suppose, at the time. That's probably what your father thought, that as a 15-year-old who had very little experience, comparatively at the time, you wanted to train horses. Why were you attracted to the idea of training horses?
And probably, like you said, a little bit of a romantic feeling. It's that partnership that you create with the horse. I've always been fascinated with it. And that's what, you really yearn for when you're working is to have that partnership and the communication so things happen smoothly and easily and more importantly, willingly. As far as obviously, making a career of it, it's like you couldn't stop. And this is both for me and for the other Dan. You couldn't stop us from doing it. And I even use that nowadays as a way to actually talk to the kids. And the next generation is, basically if you can be talked out of becoming a horse trainer, then you shouldn't do it. So the only reason Dan and I do it is you can't talk us out of it because everybody tries. And I try. Like I get people here and tell them, to take up different trades or to follow other careers because, there's far easier ways to make money and work a hell of a lot less. It's for myself. It was almost selfish. Like I said, it's a feeling that I would get from, working with horses that made me think, well, I'm going to do this full time. And that's the passion with it. Because, it's like I said before, it's a hard career to get in and it's a hard career to maintain because it's really a bit of a luxury item for so many people and horses are expensive. And like I look at other trades and I took a lawnmower down to get serviced and I get hit up for $150 an hour for an apprentice to service it. And you think about that when it comes to, horse training, there's not too many horse trainers even at an elite level that are on $150 an hour. Even if you think, I know such and such gets that a lesson, but you're not adding up all the other time he's not getting paid that amount,
in between the lessons,
as a horse
right.
trainer. So exactly, and you divide it all up, it doesn't look so good. So if you can be talked out of it, certainly look at other options where you can maybe enjoy your horses. I'm not saying that those people should get out of horses, but just enjoy your horses on a part-time level rather than a full-time level. And then you've got to also work on ways of maintaining your enjoyment, and that's something else. You talk about earlier on about quotes, and I ask people in clinics, and I say one of Dan's favourite quotes is he says, we might not be the best, but we're the funnest. And I try to remind people about enjoying yourself because there's far cheaper ways to be miserable. That's what I try to tell them because horses are so expensive. You put so much time into it. If you're not having fun, you've got to change. You've got to change something because it's not working. And whatever it might be, I'm not. Everyone's obviously different, but you've got to get back to what brought you into horses in the first place, and as an enjoyment. So going back to working with them full time, you got to be careful that it doesn't turn into a job. Even myself, like I can work a lot of horses in one day, and I've got to make sure that I can maintain, my enthusiasm from the first horse to the last horse because he doesn't understand that he's the last horse on the run, or you get frustrated because you're hangry or you're tired or whatever it is. You've got to be neutral. Every time you step on a horse and stay the same. Otherwise, that they're not too sure how to read that. And that's where I think it can get lost. When you do take it up as a career, you go, well, all of a sudden you've got to make ends meet, pay all these bills and, get staff and all the other problems you have with running a business. But then you need to make sure that, like I said, just from the horse's perspective, that you still are enjoying it and you're doing the right thing by the horse.
Mm-hmm. So for someone who you can't talk out of it, they keep this is it. This is what they want to do. You haven't talked them out of it. What else do they need to have besides not being able to be talked out of it?
That's pretty it. Like we don't look at talent or anything like that because we get told that, you're talented, and if both Dan and myself do not believe it, and that we're talented or natural at it. We certainly just think it's through persistence and hard work. So that's where that whole passion part comes from. Of course, there's all these other elements to it, like, to be a rider, you've got to be balanced and you've got to be this and you've got to be that. But I still just think that passion will trump it. You see people that are successful with all different body sizes and types. It's not something that's uniform that says, like to be a swimmer, for example. If you think, I'm going to be an Olympian swimmer or, a professional swimmer, if you're not the right body type, doesn't matter really probably how much passion you have. It's unfortunately you're not going to make it. Where in our industry, I certainly feel like it's all sizes, shapes, and it's not again gender specific. It doesn't matter if you're female or you're male. I think it's really, really even. It really just comes down to who works the hardest and has the most passion.
There's a lot of different sizes and shapes of horses as well, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
To the different sizes and shapes of people.
Yep, different disciplines and alike. But when you look at it, what I tell kids when I'm working, if we're doing something, for a classroom with kids, I just sort of say one thing that you will see that is consistent amongst, all elite horse people or even successful horse people is the consistent denominator is how hard they work. Mm-hmm. So if that doesn't bother you, then you will make it. But everybody I know who's got making a nice living from them, horses, they work extremely hard. Even Olympians, you look at any of those ones that they can't just go, I've gone to the Olympics now and I've maybe become a medalist. I can sit back and just let the money roll in. They're working as hard to maintain it as they did to achieve it.
Yep. All right. What's the best thing about working with horses, training horses? Now that you've made it, and it's not a romantic idea that you're trying to talk your father into, now that you've made it as a horse person, what's the best thing?
Your lifestyle's certainly got to be it. Even to myself today, like I'm only home for a few days a week, sometimes, or a few days a month probably, to be completely honest. And I've only just got home, late last Friday night. I'm sitting here doing this interview now, and it's a Monday evening. So as soon as I get home, being able to work my own horses and develop them, and I look at it. When I'm riding around in my own arena and with my own facilities, I've got a lot more than I probably thought that I ever would have achieved and probably and even own as far as horses and infrastructure and alike. So I owe that all to the horses. But the big part of that is my lifestyle allows me also, with working with horses, it's a lifestyle and allows me to be able to do it, from a day-to-day basis. I don't have to wait for holidays or, after work, even if I'm not necessarily at home. Like that's one aspect of enjoying it at home. But even when I travel and I'm away, I look at how fortunate we are to be able to meet new people, learn from other people's horses, and go and still develop my skills while also earning an income as well.
Yep. What about people that have influenced you? You've talked about the farrier, Pete Webber. Yep. You talked about Corey Holden. Mm-hmm. Okay, who else? And the other Dan, of course, Dan James. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Pete Webber was certainly my first influence in horses, both as a farrier and I say master farrier and master horseman, and so I got a really good grounding from him and a really good understanding. And from there, I did. Once I finished my apprenticeship, I went over and worked for Corey Holden, and that got my passion. I already had an idea that I would be passionate about working with cow horses, but that certainly cemented that home. So even now, when I'm home, that's probably really what I focus on the most is cow horses and getting better at being able to sort of train those and also breed them as well, and we also sell them at the same time. but from there, it sort of I've got a really long list, and the other dam's the same. Like, it doesn't just come down to one. You know, there's another Western Australia that's really handy, but no one would have probably, particularly on the East Coast, would have probably heard of him. But Steve Moyer, you know, he helped me a lot with getting probably a starting program for horses. You know, up until then, I'd break in horses, but I didn't have a program. You know, you just go sort of fly by the seat of your pants. And he was the first one to actually introduce me to a bit of a system. And then I also my wife, so her father, or my father-in-law, has a pretty big thoroughbred stud back in Western Australia, and I did some work for him. And helping him with his yearlings and his weanlings, and got to develop a lot of skills in groundwork, which I was, you know, really fortunate about. He also come through like a Pirelli and Ray Hunt background, so he was thinking along the same lines, and really helped me get the numbers, you know, with handling foals, you know, weanlings, yearlings, and then he also had a stock horse stud as well, so able to break in and train, and he got me started in camp drafting. So that's what, you know, we do as a bit of a passion now. Once Dan and I met, which was in Western Australia, of course we started to bounce ideas off each other and bring it in and learn from one another. But it was when we started doing our entertainment and our liberty that we found Heath Harris. So Heath Harris has you know, done the same as what Steve did, as far as give us a structure and a program for working with liberty horses, which we've been able to develop into our own skill set and then teach around the world, essentially, which is you know, really a foundation that we got from Heath and his horses. Because up until then, it was a bit like I was saying before with the breaking in. Dan and I were just flying by the seat of our pants, and we could change our mind, you know, halfway through a training session because we see the horse doing something different, and we'd go, oh, we'll do this now, we'll do that now, and that doesn't really set you up for much consistency. And it's probably, you know, everything that, well, for us, we probably learned a lot then from what we did wrong rather than what we did right. And so the stuff that we teach now is probably lessons learned from back then, and knowing that no, you don't do that because we've done that, and it doesn't work because of these reasons. And he certainly got both him and I on the same track. And then from there, we've been really, really fortunate. What's probably the best part of being, you know, well-known, I guess, entertainment duo and horsemanship duo is that we then get access to world-class, you know, clinicians, trainers, and even other entertainers, because we go to these expos and we travel the world and we get to meet them, and they, you know, often just through conversation then end up, you know, inviting you to maybe their facilities, and you get these not only lifelong friendships, but these also, you know, opportunities to share your own skill sets with them, and then they share theirs with you, and so we've got the list has got even longer with you know, mentors and people that we look up to because they're like-minded and they enjoy what we do and we enjoy what they do, and we're happy to share. And that's something that, I think, you know, and I reckon if you ask Dan, he would answer it exactly the same. In our mind, it's probably been the biggest benefit of being the double dance.
Yep. Tell us about horses. If you've got a particular horse, or if you would like to mention a couple of horses that you think have really helped you in your career, as in they've taught you things. You've gone to train them, but then they've taught you how to train horses better.
Yeah, well, there's the ones that probably stand out the most are the ones that make me look better than I am. That's the ones that you'll probably find every trainer that's you know, had some successful horse will probably admit to you that there's something special about them that probably make you look a little better than you are. And even my first horse that I actually owned myself, which is a mare called the name of Susie Q, which I had purchased from Pete Webber, that master farrier and horseman, as a yearling, and he helped me break her in and help me train her well. She looked after me like, you know, like well, no one could have. You know, she was an angel as far as her behaviour. And I used to do some crazy things because I'd looked up to all these great horsemen. And the second ride she ever had in her life, I was riding around the bush and I just decided to take the bridle off because, you know, I wanted to ride without a bridle.
Yeah.
And I just rode a 2-year-old, no bridle, through the bush all the way home and was safe. And that was what she was doing. She was just looking after me all the time and made me probably think at the time that I was a way better horseman than what I actually was, because I started to do that with other horses and started figuring out very, very quickly that I may not have been God's gift to horses, and I had to get some skill set. Now, that mare has then become the mother of pretty much my entire Liberty team now. So I've been breeding her for a long period of time, probably 10 or so years of foals I've had out of her, and I've got 5 or 6 of her horses right now in my Liberty team that I can go out and use. Well, we do go out and use in our shows. So she's certainly one that I probably put it down to, not in teaching me as far as challenged me, but probably definitely inspiring me, that's for sure. And if she was probably a bit harder on me, maybe I wouldn't have had the passion for Liberty horses and bridleless horses and natural horsemanship. So I certainly thank her. And then we get challenged from a day-to-day basis when we go out and put yourself in that public eye. Often people bring sort of troubled and challenging horses to your clinics and to your workshops, or even to our training facility for re-education. And those horses teach us a hell of a lot because they've been outsmarting humans, and that's the problem. We a lot of times want to give them sort of a negative analogy to the horse and say that he's a rogue or he's this or he's that. But I often put it down to he's just smarter than us, and that means we've got to get smarter to be able to work with him. So those horses teach me a lot, both when we get it right and both when we get it wrong. And I love traveling and having that downtime when you're just alone with your own thoughts, and I'll process what not only we've done right, but things that maybe we've done wrong, and make sure that we learn from those mistakes. I think that's really, really important as a horseman. Is you don't probably realise when you first get introduced to horses, but how much of a mental game it is. It's not just a physical game. So about getting them to do things that we want physically, it's also a lot about how it's achieved mentally. And so in order to do that, we have to be really conscious and thinking all the time. And that's what those horses have probably taught me. And like I said, the list would be really too long because you find it on a daily basis. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Thinking about all the things you've done and the places you've gone, the people you've met, the performances you've done. What's been your proudest moment?
Well, one of the ones I guess that we got the most recognition for was Australia's Got Talent, and that was probably a surreal moment. I won't necessarily say it's the proudest moment, but it was definitely the pinnacle at the time. And even Dan and myself, we had no idea probably how much of a launching pad that ended up being for us. From time to time I check it out on YouTube to see where the hit count is, and at the last time I checked, just one video has been viewed 15 million times. So it really launched us as a performing duo, that's for sure.
Sort of puts you back into mainstream, doesn't it? Mainstream people, not just horse people.
That's right. But also those the horse people, they find that information out too. So we've got a lot of different people around the world then probably got to know about us, and after that, particularly in Australia, everybody definitely knew who we were. Well, up until then, it was only probably people that had seen your show somewhere that then would remember, know your name. So if they'd seen one of your shows, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I know the Double Dance," but they didn't. Other than that, where after Australia's Got Talent, this is like everybody seemed to know who we were around Australia, and they would always, bring it up in conversation. But as far as probably achievements, it's been the World Equestrian Games. We were part of the opening ceremony in 2010. 10, and that's something that we both Dan and I, really look back on fondly, knowing that we didn't even have our own horses. We took ourselves to the States and trained two other horses of a friend of ours who loaned them to us to perform not only during the opening ceremony but also throughout the duration of the event. We were doing horsemanship demonstrations daily.
Yep.
That was certainly, and back in 2010 was something that, we really think was certainly the pinnacle of the events that we've been a part of. And now we're actually getting ready to go back again. So we're in 2018, that's 8 years, so we're in the second World Equestrian Games where we'll be doing the same opening ceremony, demonstration, and the other Dan is actually also competing in the reining there. So that's something that, again, I reckon we'll look back on fondly and think that was certainly a huge achievement for both of us. But I even just look sometimes a bit more humbled and think about it as just Equitana. I remember going to Equitana as an auditor or a spectator, and thinking that if I could just one time, get in and do one demonstration, one time at Equitana in my lifetime, I would have made, that was where I was at. And the other Dan, we didn't know each other, but we were at the exact same event at the exact same time thinking the exact same thing. And this is an Equitana year. I can't even tell you how many Equitanas we've been to, but, I still get humbled by our beginnings and don't take that for granted that we've, preparing for a huge show there this year, both as entertainers as well as educators, and think about, back to that first time that I went to the event thinking just one time. We've been fortunate to do it around the world, both through US, Canada, even New Zealand. Dan's been through Europe, and we've been able to do these horsemanship demonstrations. So there's a lot of that we're really proud of, but I still think, Equitana is pretty special as well.
Yeah. Thinking about that and thinking that the journey that you've come, and that's starting right off from your father saying get a trade. What's been the biggest? You've said that Australia's Got Talent's been a big breakthrough, but what about before you had any breakthroughs, before you got to Equitana, what about some of the challenges along the way? What have they been?
Well, challenges even been through injury. So before all of that, and both Dan and I had met, but only a couple of times. I was leading a couple of young horses, and I think in the process, I don't remember it, but in the process was knocked over, and had quite a major episode or a seizure that led me to becoming unconscious and being in a coma for a few days, and certainly after waking up from that and not having a lot of function at the time, so I had very, very short-term memory, and so I'll tell you the same conversation multiple times, even just while we're talking in a 5-minute, conversation, I would tell you the same story over and over again, and I didn't have a whole lot of balance, and I was having to tell myself how to walk and things like that, and it shook me up. I can't remember now how old I was, but I would have only maybe been 20, 21 at the time. And that was certainly something that probably challenged me for a little while to get back and get back to where, back to what we were doing, which was obviously on shoeing horses then and also riding them. And easily, I never ever think, and I've had some accidents since then, I never think it's about quitting or anything like that. So it hasn't been, a struggle or changed the way I've felt about it. And I've never obviously blamed the horses either for it, but it's certainly, been struggling.
But what about breaking into the performances? Breaking into the, like when you said, I'd love to be at Equitana. Is it getting the contacts? Is it, because obviously you've got to be doing a good job. But breaking in to be able to be doing those performances, to travel and do performances.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think's been the challenges along there?
That side of things probably come a lot easier than I expected, as far as, it wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it, and it certainly wasn't new people. I even look out there now and think both Dan and myself have probably influenced another generation to go out and perform. So we've got a lot of people probably underneath ourselves that we've even helped that now do equine entertainment, and it is with YouTube and things like that, it's probably easier to get yourself out in the spotlight and to probably create an image that shows like Equitana want to invite you to their event. I don't really remember any of that as being a struggle, but what I do remember as being a struggle is probably, for Dan and myself is to do it and do it financially. I think if we try to launch ourselves now, we both have a young family and we have property and everything else, that let's say we had a real job, that's what my brother calls it anyway, a real job, that we probably wouldn't do it because it took every, not every minute of our time, but every dollar that we were earning. You'd maybe get a show performance fee, and then you'd be at home creating a new show and or trying to do some marketing or fuel for the truck to get to the next show, and it would suck every dollar out of us. And I think we did it at the right time because, like I said, we didn't have too many dependents on us and the like, and we still had other skill sets. So we're, shoeing horses or breaking horses in or doing whatever we needed to do to help fund us into travelling and getting our name.
But that's the persistence and the passion, though, isn't it?
That's exactly how it is. And we had no, there was no option to fail. Yeah, that's how we looked at it at the time. It was just like, this is what we're going to do. And if that doesn't work, that's, we tried something. If that doesn't work, that's fine. We'll just try something else. But I'm probably, like as far as I'm a bit more of a pessimistic at times, and Dan's probably got the other way. And so, when I'd often think, why would people want to pay us to do a show? I would always think that it wasn't going to last, and think, we're lucky to get this show, and we're lucky to get that show. But it wasn't gonna last, and I always had my farrieing to fall back on, and then my wife's also a vet, so I'm like, well, we'll be all right. Where the other Dan would be like, we're going to go to World Equestrian Games, or we're going to go and do this, or we're going to go and do that. And funnily enough, it's more times than not, that's what's happened.
So if someone wanted to break into that now, they've seen you, they've seen the double Dans going around, but they say, this is what I want to do, and their skills are okay, they've got some good skills. How can they break into it? What would you tell them?
To get a start, you need an audience. And that's why I said, social media is, you get an audience there. So, sharing videos and stuff that, you've achieved with your horses, whether it's education or entertainment, but then also getting to shows. So, we would, prostitute ourselves pretty much to get a show, where nowadays, the show has to meet our criteria for us to do the show, where back then we would certainly meet their criteria just to get out in front of an audience. So whether it meant, at times I remember performing in rodeos that we knew that would have big crowds for very, very little money, almost just drinking money, for Dan and I to go and do it just to get in front of that number of people. And that's, something that we did for a long time in the early stages. When it was shows, we'd look at those bigger shows that we wanted to be a part of, and we would approach them. Where now we sit back and probably have those shows approach us, but we would approach them and find out, get a contact, find out who was doing the entertainment, and start talking to them from there. And that's how we would push ourselves into the industry. Was really by making those contacts ourselves, because no one's going to hand it to you. It's not like you come and work for me and I'm going to go and give you all these contacts to the shows. Or anybody else won't give them to you. You've got to go out and put yourself out there and find it. And one leads on to another, because they see you perform there. There'll be somebody that thinks, I wouldn't mind having them at my show, and they'll lead you to somewhere else. And then someone is at that show and they'll get you to another. That's how Dan and I ended up from the West Coast to the East Coast, because we were performing at the Perth Royal Show, and the Sydney Royal Show representatives were there looking for scouting for new acts and talent and, different things.
Yeah, good.
And they approached us there and brought us over to Sydney. And so once Dan said, well, we've got to go, and when we go, we'll move over there. And I thought, like I said, me being a bit pessimistic, said that, well, that's okay. We're not going to get enough shows over on the East Coast. So I always had a backup plan to just get back to Western Australia. and we've never actually looked back since then. So it's been great.
Yep. Now, thinking about you doing a clinic now, you go out, you're doing a clinic, you've got a whole lot of new people with their horses and they're all there to learn some horsemanship skills. What's a common fault that you see with the partnership between them and their horses?
The one that I'm probably, targeting at the moment would be that we still want to relate the horse to a human. As much as we know that they're not, they're a horse, and people might say, no, Dan, you're miles away. They don't. They still want to, analyse them back to being a human. So when they react differently and do things, we misread it, what it means and how it was created, and also how to fix it. So I'm also figured out that in a 2-day horsemanship clinic, there's not a lot of time. So there's not a lot of time for me to be able to teach you our program, because you're just not going to, it's just not going to sink in. So I'm working now more and more on that mental aspect, not only for the horses but for the humans, to get their mind working, because if I can get that a little bit better, the rest sort of takes care of itself. A friend of mine, Warren Backhouse, starts his clinics by saying, everything that your horse knows right, you've taught it. And then he takes a breath. Everything that your horse knows wrong, you've taught it. And the reason why he has to bring that up is no one's ever aware when things go wrong. I get people messaging me, emailing us and phoning us and wanting to send horses to us with problems. And when you ask them where the problem came from, 90% of the time they've got no idea, and they look to blame somebody else. It was the previous owner. They might have owned the horse for the last 2 years, but the horse did it with them, or even worse, the horse breaker or somebody else has created this problem, and they're not aware of where it started and how they have taught it. But if in the same scenario, they had taught their horse something positively, like let's say a flying lead change, for example, which takes a fair bit of work, and if that person had a horse that didn't have a lead change on them, and they taught them an educated lead change, and I asked them, how did you teach that? They'd be able to sit you down and explain it from the very beginning, because you have to be able to achieve that complex manoeuvre. You need to understand how to teach it. So you would say, well,
and it's the preparation too, isn't it?
That. Exactly. So it's the preparation, to get that end result. That same process is when your horse has learnt an evasion. He's learnt it the exact same way. So there was a process, and it had a starting point, and it's got a finishing point, and you're ringing me when you've got the finished product. That's what it is. And you're just not aware where it started, how it started, and what you've created. So I'm sort of trying to get people, and even the one that gets me, I still crack myself up, is, when I'm at a clinic or a demonstration and a horse kicks out and everyone goes, oh, like, dun, 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 a horse is kicked out. It's a horse.
Yeah.
What do you think kicking out? He's not kicking at me. He's not trying to kill me by kicking at me because he wants to fight me. People look at it and it would be like if I hit somebody. It's a very deliberate act. If I went and punched somebody in the street, or I'm having confrontation with somebody and I punched or lashed out at them, it's a very deliberate act, isn't it? And it's confronting that person exactly. There's no hiding what my feelings are. A horse kicks out, and humans seem, like I said, on the outside looking in, seems to think that's the way that horse is thinking. And it's like it's a natural reaction. It could have been for a number of reasons that the horse did it, and it's just the horse trying something. So that's just one example of many that I think we misread when it comes to our horses, because we're still trying to see that he's thinking like along the same lines as ourselves. When I try to get to the people and when I say that, the number one problem that I find is probably not relating not trying to relate horses to humans, that we need to actually understand how they think, and it's much simpler than we probably have in our head.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com. What about books? Have you got a book that you've read that's influenced you?
Funnily enough, I'm not a huge reader, but I do like reading like autobiographies.
Okay.
And I've read a few horse ones and also sports ones, because sports ones are good as well. Because there'll be a lot of things, it's a mental thing, and the way that, I guess the structure and how you prepare for sport.
Any in particular you'd like to mention?
The one that I probably use a lot is Takeover Target. So that's a racehorse, and the story on Takeover Target is that he was sort of a failed racehorse that got a second go and ends up winning $8.1 million. So he was a horse that, he was bought for reasonable money as a yearling, nothing, extravagant, but solid, 50, 60, maybe even 80,000. Bought, tried as a racehorse and then failed. So the trainers and the owners have decided this horse is not going to make it, and we're going to sell it, as a lot of racehorses do, unfortunately, just to dog meat. And this other trainer who is, just passionate about horses, and he's driving taxis by night to fund his, addiction to horses, essentially.
Yep.
Trains horses during the day. He's living in a caravan, doesn't even have a house, living in a caravan at the track. All his money and his time is going purely into horses. Buys this horse for $400-500 because he sees something in him. So then this horse has then now changed, obviously, his not only the horse's life pathway, but obviously this trainer's as well, because in the book you'll see a photo of the trainer at the Royal Ascot with a photo with the Queen, because he's won one of the Queen's races. Yep. And he's there at a top hat and tails with Takeover Target and the Queen.
Wow.
And so I'm looking at that, and what I get from that story is, and I call it in my 4 pillars of horsemanship, empathy. And empathy is seeing it from the horse's perspective. So he's not changed the horse. It's not like the horse had an injury or something like that. He's just seen something in that horse and changed it to turn this horse from, never winning a race to winning $8.1 million. So I was fascinated by that story, and I keep it in the probably in front of mind when I'm working with horses, because you just can't write them off. Yeah. You can't just go, oh, this horse isn't going to make it because of this reason or that reason. We've got to change something sometimes, and that could unleash a champion.
Yes, yeah.
And how many other horses potentially could have been Takeover Target?
Yeah, exactly.
But didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I think there's a lot of stories there. Even horses that may have gone to the doggers, and for some reason someone's rescued them, and they're not going to win, $8.1 million or whatever it was, but they're going to give someone some good riding and some good lessons and some good life skills.
There's plenty of those horses, and that's what I tell people in clinics and in conversations about it. That's one example of millions that would be out there. And like you've just mentioned, in smaller ways, in bigger ways, and I think it's fantastic. And I think as a horseman, it is super relevant.
Yeah, for sure. And remember, you can find all the books recommended by our guests at horsechats.com/books. You can have a look at the guest page for the individual book they recommended, or just look at the recommended books by order of popularity at horsechats.com/books. All right, what are you looking forward to now, Dan?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, World Equestrian Games is literally, I leave in a week's time.
Okay.
I'll be in the air this time next week, and that's something exciting, catching up with the other Dan, performing with the other Dan, as well as all the other clinicians and, riders that will be there. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly something we're looking forward to. And then Equitanas this year, and another event that I go to in New Zealand, Equidays. So they're both in October and November. So that's things that I, certainly are thinking about in any spare moments that I have, because we've got to prepare so much for that. And it's really cool to be able to highlight our horsemanship, in that sort of forum, both World Equestrian Games and those equine expos. That's certainly things that we look forward to.
Brilliant. Dan, just in a couple of sentences, if you can, just summarise up your philosophy with horses, with horsemanships, with training horses.
I guess, the philosophy we've almost talked about all parts of it.
Yep.
But
that's why I said in a couple of sentences.
It's hard. It is definitely seeing it from the horse's perspective and creating a willing partner. I'll leave you with this one, I guess, in some ways. I say in my clinics that successful wives are the best horse trainers. And the reason why I believe that is because they've been successfully training their husbands without them realising it. And that is the art to horsemanship, is you don't want your horse to think that you're training him. He's actually training you. He's training you to release the contact of the rein. He's training you to release the contact to your leg, and whatever pressure you're applying, that I want him to think that he's in control of it by him creating the correct response. And that's really what it's about. And then he's willing, isn't he? Because that's the same thing about husbands. If it's his idea,
yes.
If it's his idea, it's willing.
Yeah. Dan, how can people contact you? What's the best way?
For us, probably the one that's the most effective or efficient would be Facebook. So Double Dan Horsemanship on Facebook, and that's got both myself and obviously the other Dan, or through our website, which is we've actually got a new website coming out, which is just www.doubledan.com.au. So we took away the horsemanship, so it's a little easy to type.
Yes.
And that's another good way to get a hold of us. But like I said, we're probably most interactive on our Facebook page, where that has obviously all the events that we go to, updates, but also messages, so people can message us on there and hear back from one of us.
Brilliant. And those details will be on our Horse Chats page, Dan's page, which will be horsechats.com/Dan Steers. But I think if you go to horsechats.com and just search for Dan, you'll find him. Dan, thanks very much for talking to us. Really good. We'd love to have you back again, maybe after the World Equestrian Games, maybe even after Equitana Equidays. But, we'd certainly love to have you back just to go in and drill into a little bit more detail about some of the areas you've talked about. And I'll see if we can embed that YouTube video on your page as well, which will be horsechats.com/Dan Steers.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries, Dan. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Now, if you're still there, you probably know that I'm absolutely passionate about education within the horse industry. That's why I host this podcast. My other venture is Online Horse College. Have a look now at onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.